Welcome to The State of Us.
Beyond mainstream cable news and party lines, with a millennial and a boomer, The State of Us pushes past the noise and uncovers all the issues that matter.
Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
From hospitals, railways, and dockyards to schools, shops, and trading houses, Myanmar is at a standstill. Strikers hope their actions will force the army to return power after its coup on February 1st. What's the danger of ignoring Myanmar? Is there a danger to it? I mean, we're the United States of America. Do we really need to give a crap about what's happening over in Myanmar? Well, Lance and I are going to tell you why we think that you should care and why we need to pay attention. We've also got to talk about Russia and China, though. What's the danger of ignoring them? Are they really focused on building up a stronger military, or is there something else at play? There's a lot to talk about, and as always, it can be difficult to feel the effects of the world stage in our day-to-day lives, but the reality is it matters to us, and it matters how the world perceives us. How we respond and handle these things has an impact on us, and that's exactly why we've got to talk about it today. But of course, no conversation on world affairs would be complete without
TrueChat senior historian and an educator of more than 30 years. Here is your friendly redneck liberal, Lance Jackson.
Well, I guess we only have to pay attention if you're concerned about the United States continuing to be a world power, because that's part of what being in power means, is that you have to take a leadership role and you have to be interested in everything that's going on. Now, obviously, some things take precedent over others, but when you're talking about liberty and freedom and democracy, if that's what you stand for, and I still hope that's what the United States stands for. I know it's what I believe in, and that we need to then take care of those fledgling countries that are trying to get to that democratic state, because that will help us out with the people that we are adversaries with. And that is our word for the day, adversary, adversary. And it means a person who opposes or fights against another, an opponent or an enemy. And so it's kind of interesting that we have Russia and China together here with Myanmar, because part of the Russian and Chinese plan is to wrest power away from the United States, and places like Myanmar and other smaller countries in Latin America or oil-rich countries in the Middle East are what they have their sights on, and taking the leadership away from the United States. So I think that's the main focus of today's episode.
Well, and I think, by far and away the most important thing that we must discuss and that we need our listeners' input on, you can send us an email, podcast@thestateofus.org, is it adversary or adversary? And my guess is that the adversary crowd's going to lose. But I don't know why it is, Lance, but the hunt for Red October, that's the first time I heard it said that way. The Russian captain pronounced it adversary. And I kind of liked that pronunciation of our word of the day. So audience, let us know. Weigh in on this critical topic.
So do you like aluminium as well?
I think it takes longer to say.
For aluminum?
Aluminium.
Because I think you have the same history. And, I'm reading from Webster's New World Dictionary, second college edition. So
I feel like it takes longer to say that way. So I don't know if they have about the same length of delivery time, then I think we just choose which one sounds better, right? I don't like, though, when people say potato. No, who says potato? I've never met anybody that's called it a potato. So maybe I haven't met the right people, but.
Well, how about crick or creek?
Let's see. Now that's one I've met people that say it both way. I think it's creek. Well, here, I think it's creek. Or is it crick for Missouri?
Yeah. Down home, you go wash your rig in the creek.
In the creek. Okay.
Yeah. You know what a rig is?
A truck.
Yes,
it's
your vehicle.
Okay.
It's your vehicle, yeah.
Can you call a car a rig?
Not usually.
Okay. I was going to say, I feel like that's kind of anticlimactic or something. Yeah. Anyway, so weigh in. Let us know, folks. send us an email, podcast@thestateofus.org. So Myanmar, Lance.
Welcome to English 101 and the pronunciation of words on the True Chat Show.
That's right.
On the State of Us.
So Myanmar is something that you and I have actually been talking about for a long time, right? Just like adversary and adversary.
Yes.
I don't know if the conversation's been going on quite that long, but we took some time, went back into the archives, and we were able to determine that we probably talked about Myanmar before this, but we were starting to try to get people to pay attention to what was going on there back in 2017, almost 4 years ago on this show, September of 2017. So what we're going to do now, rather than just reinvent the wheel, is we're going to share with you what we said back then, and then build on it with an update from today. So here's Lance explaining from an article back in 2017 the basis of our show. Let's listen in.
The issue seems to be here that the country is run by President Nobel Peace Laureate Aung San Suu Kyi. So she has the backing of a lot of the Western democratic powers because of some of the positive things they think that she has tried to do within the country. However, the military was able to write the Constitution, and so she is kind of hamstrung by the military. And what the military has done, according to the United Nations Secretary General, is ethnic cleansing. And the problem seems to be that there is a group within Myanmar that called the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army, or ARSA. This group, known as ARSA, and its founder Atta Ullah, said it is defending Muslim Rohingya. In the coming year, Myanmar will suffer from a full-blown insurgency unless it works with the international community to resolve this escalating conflict, says the head of the International Center for Political Violence and Terrorism Research at the School of International Studies in Singapore. The question becomes, how much should the West step in? The UN Security Council, which meets next week, the Secretary General says the two major issues on their agenda will be North Korea and Myanmar.
It's the same thing. We talk about the Syrian civil war a lot more than mainstream media because we're hoping that our listeners are getting the message that, that's the worst humanitarian crisis since what happened with the Nazis and the Jews, in the Holocaust. And it's just bizarre to me that the world doesn't cover that more. And this is another one of those where my initial reaction isn't about how awful it is, because I think most people looking at it can say, yeah, this is awful. My initial reaction is, why haven't we been hearing about this? Why has it gotten this bad? And our media outlets haven't told us anything about it. So September of 2017, Lance, it sounds like we were still beating that drum about people not being informed about things because the media decides that, covering the royal family scandals is more important than talking about Myanmar. And it seems like we're still struggling with that, right? I mean, that's basically the same battle that's still being fought. But we wanted to point out to people not, look how right we were, but we're not covering it just because the media's kind of dabbled at it right now. We're doing it because we've been doing it since 2017.
That is correct. And, unfortunately, the big companies are worried about what pays the bills, and we're worried about getting you the information. And so, here's another human rights issue that, again, somebody's trying to establish some form of a democracy, this time in the Far East, in Asia. And it seems like that would be something the United States would want to do to counter our adversaries over there. And instead, we've let the president, the person that was mentioned there, the Nobel laureate, we've let them be thrown in jail and a military coup take place in Myanmar. I think it's the third since 1988 in Myanmar, the third military coup. It has one of the worst economies and one of the worst human rights records in the world. And again, and you can say, well, there's a pandemic going on and we have the issues in the United States and we had an election and we have this and it's vaccines. Okay. But this is still going on, folks, and we need to be concerned about it because, in my opinion, what is the role of the United States in the world, and what do we want that role to be in the future?
The article explains that the military seized power in a coup last month, per what you shared there, Lance, and an entire nation has come to a standstill. This is the part that I want people to pick up on, Lance, because I think this this is impressive, and this should communicate to us just how serious these people are, that they are not okay with this. This isn't one of those situations where we kind of have to wonder, do the people want their democracy or not? Listen to this. From hospitals, railways, and dockyards to schools, shops, and trading houses, much of society has stopped showing up for work in an attempt to stymie the military regime and force it to return authority to a civilian government. While demonstrators continue to brave bullets, the quiet persistence of this mass civil disobedience movement has grown into a potent weapon against the military. For all the planning that went in to the coup, the generals seem to have been utterly unprepared for the breadth and depth of the resistance against them. Quote, "They robbed the power of the people from our elected government," said a clerk at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs who refused to work along with most of her colleagues. "Our country's democracy journey has just started, and we can't lose it again." End quote. So basically, Lance, what you've got is you've got a country that has said, and keep in mind, these people, their idea of a good paying job, okay, is like $120 a month. $120 a month. That's a living wage, right? They're not showing up for work. They're willing to starve in order to wait out and in fact, there's even a guy in the article, Lance, and I thought this was interesting, right, who says, if I starve, it will have been worth it. You know, if I die because of this, because I can't eat, because I have no money, it will have been worth it.
And what we've seen is the military junta in charge has responded by killing people.
Right.
So there you go, folks. I mean, so what are you going to do? Sit by and watch somebody fight for their independence as the United States and not intervene, not step in? Because what it comes down to, it is economics. And it's, you know, they have taken away, the U.S. has frozen about $1 billion worth of Myanmar assets so that the military can't get a hold of it. But one of our other topics today, China is still buying oil from Myanmar and sending about $90 million a month into the military's coffers, as well as illegal trade in jade and teak. So, you know, the military is willing to do whatever is necessary to stay in power, trade illegally, shoot its own citizens. And so, you know, is freezing assets enough? Should the United States take a bigger role? Let us know, you know, what you think. Obviously, you can tell from my angle, I think we ought to do what we can to support those areas that are trying to become democratic, because that is what will allow the United States to stay in as a world leader. It's not our size of our army. It's not our military. It's not our nuclear weapons. It's how many people can we get to believe in the same things we believe in around the world.
It certainly should be inspiring at the very least, Lance, I think, and it should communicate to us, to your point. I mean, I'm there with sanctions are not enough. I mean, we've been talking about this, like I said, for almost 4 years. It's a problem that's been going on a lot longer than that, just for the record. It's not like it's only been this time period. And this is not one of those gray areas where we have to wonder whether or not these people want democracy. When the majority of the country has stopped showing up for work and is willing to starve, I think their message is pretty clear. So what do you think we should do? Send us an email, podcast@thestateofus.org, podcast@thestateofus.org. What about Russia and China? Conventionally speaking, we've got a bigger military. So are they really a threat? Well, the answer is yes. Yes, they are. But why and what do we need to do if we'd like to stay the world power? Keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
It may look like the bad old days of the Cold War, but today's bitter superpower competition is about technology, cyber conflict, and influence operations. We're talking about China and Russia and what's happened in Biden's first 60 days or so in office here with these two world powers. Lance and I have talked about a lot of foreign relations stuff over the years. It's interesting, obviously, that Myanmar, what we discussed in the first segment, right, and China have a connection here with part of what I think would help the people in Myanmar is if China would stop buying Myanmar's oil until the democratically elected government is returned to power. Because the reality is the military is still getting money to operate on, right? And they're getting that money largely in part because their oil sales have not been discontinued. They've got this illegal trade, quote unquote, illegal trade going on of some other items, but they're legally selling, quote unquote, I hate to say their oil because it's not really the military's oil, but the military is selling the oil, continuing to sell the oil to China, who is still buying the oil. And that leads to the problem that we're in. But what we're talking about with China and Russia, Lance, is understanding this shift. The Cold War had a lot to do, yes, with technological prowess, but a lot to do with, whose military was really up to the task, who had the most nukes, how far could they reach. There were a lot of things there that dealt specifically with conventional military might, power, shows of force. Today's world's a little different. And when we're talking about China in particular, and whether or not they're going to take our place as the world's power, it deals a lot more with technology, cyber conflict, and influence operations, right? Interestingly enough, like with Myanmar, right? China is working in all these little countries around the world and some bigger countries around the world to invest, to build, to become buddy-buddy with them. And for the most part, the United States, at least until just recently, has kind of been sitting by and not doing a lot about that.
President Trump was all about the United States, right? We became very nationalist in our take and in our attitude, which means we only worry about us and how it affects us. And we don't worry about world affairs. We don't play in the world stage. And that was our attitude for 4 years. And so when you do that, it allows for other countries to move in and take over some areas and try to nudge in and wedge themselves in so that they can gain control in areas where you have been in control. So that's just right or wrong. You can, have your opinion there, but when you leave an area, you allow for others to come in. When you leave a neighborhood, when you leave a country, it allows others to come in. And that's what we've seen with China. And of course, having grown up during the Cold War period, it never really made sense when you talked about nuclear arsenals because, okay, who wins in a nuclear war? You send your nuclear missiles, we send ours, we blow everybody up, the world's covered in radiation, everything's dying, mutating, whatever. You're not really winning. So
it's just bad.
Right. It's just bad for everybody. So it makes sense that the Chinese, who want power, who want to be the world power, they make no bones about that, would go at it in this manner so that they have a world left to rule over. And we saw their attitude on display in Anchorage last week or a couple weeks ago, when their opening gambit was to downplay human rights in the United States. Don't tell us what a great country you have and how everybody wants to be like you when you're killing people in the streets, Black Lives Matter, all of this other, police officers, and right or wrong, it doesn't matter, folks. I'm not getting into those areas and you're like, oh, wow, blah, 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 blah. Okay. I'm just saying the Chinese used that and twisted it in such a way to make the United States not look appealing to other countries.
Well, and I mean, in some, credit, I suppose, to previous administrations, sanctions, trade war, right? These things have been going on. But one of the points that the article makes, or I guess one of the quotes that it makes, is that the feeling of Robert M. Gates, who's a former CIA director and defense secretary, said recently in a public interview with the Washington Post, Russia is going to be a challenge for the United States, a national security challenge for us, and maybe in some respects the most dangerous one as long as Putin is there. Sanctions, quote, are not going to do much good, end quote. The point being, I guess he doesn't get into a lot of specifics about what should we do, but that our idea of, well, we're just going to sanction them. We've been sanctioning Russia for the past, 10, 15 years now, and to different varying degrees for different reasons, whatever. It hasn't had a major impact on changing their behavior. Yes, we may be able to measure right? The economic hurt or the individual hurt that's caused by it. But at the end of the day, Vladimir Putin doesn't seem terribly concerned with that.
Well, we have two adversaries here, and they are different in that China's gross domestic product is on track to become the largest in the world, if not already, whereas the Russian economy is compared to Italy. So when you talk about sanctions, you're talking about economic sanctions, and it's not going to affect Russia because Russia's economy, basically, folks, is in the tank. It's not. I mean, if you want to look up Italy's GDP and what it's worth and what it does, and it's, you don't hear about Italy as a major player on the world stage as far as economics are concerned. So Russia's not there. But what you have, and let's just, however Donald Trump felt about Putin for whatever reason, let's understand Vladimir Putin is a former KGB agent that was trained during the Cold War. Putin is not a nice person. He was not trained to be a nice person. He was not educated in that manner. He is educated and trained by the former Soviet Union to do whatever was necessary, legally or illegally, to push the agenda of the government. And now he's in charge. Okay. So he's not a nice man. He will do whatever it takes to get things done. We've seen nerve gas used on dissidents in foreign countries, on people that are speaking badly about his government.
Well, Putin even has lamented, right, that the Russia of today is a shadow of the Soviet Union that trained him to be a KGB agent. It's no secret that Russia's economic prowess has greatly changed from the era of the Cold War. And in a lot of other ways has changed as well. But the one area that they haven't changed in is their ability to still cause problems for us and to still, if nothing else, prove that they can be a dangerous annoyance, right? Because to say that they're just an annoyance, I think, isn't fair in that what they're doing, the level of attacks that are being carried out, the thing that should concern all of us that China and Russia are doing is they may already have, and we may not know it or people in our government know it, the ability to take down our power grids, right? And our infrastructure systems and take over transit systems, things that become serious issues, to dismantle computer networks responsible for processing financial transactions, right? Banking, on and on and on. It's not just, oh, well, yeah, Facebook went down for the day. Part of what we'll talk about coming up is what should we do as a response? What do you think that we should do as a response? We'd love to hear from you. How can people let us know, Lance, what they're thinking? They send us an email, right? We have an email where listeners can send stuff in, and we like to hear from them.
That's true. They can email us at podcast@thestateofus.org. So let us know what you're thinking. Let us share your thoughts with us. And if you're lucky enough, we'll even share your thoughts on air.
What do we need to do about Russia and China? Or do we need to do anything? What do I mean by that? Keep it here on The State of Us, and you'll find out.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
China and Russia are undoubtedly still coming for us, the United States. I don't think they ever really stopped, but they're coming for us in new ways, specifically technological ways, particularly cyber attacks, and they're looking to expand their sphere of influence, right, which we've talked about with Myanmar, lots of other small countries. There's all these places where they just love to do things that are problematic for us, right? But it is an interesting love-hate relationship because at the same time, let us not forget that at least from China's standpoint, a large part of their gross domestic product is selling goods and services to the United States of America, right? Just like a large part of our consumption is very dependent on China. And part of our ability to produce our gross domestic product is that we send all of the things that we design to be manufactured in China, right? So the notion that we can just, for example, cut China out of our lives, we've talked about this before. Can we do that? Sure, we can do that. Are we going to realistically do that? Probably not, because it would, overnight, there would be huge economic repercussions of doing that to us, right? I mean, yes, it would hurt China, but we would hurt. Immediately, the price of all manner of goods would skyrocket beyond anything that we're used to. And we'd no longer be able to afford all sorts of things. So I think it's really important to understand that we have to look at ways to communicate to them. We're not going to just take this stuff lying down. But before we answer what do we do about it, I think it's first important, Lance, that we answer the question, do we still want to lead? I think there's this assumption that we have, or that that media commentators have, that is just this assumption that the American people want the United States to still be number one. Or are we comfortable maybe shifting into a position that China's in and kind of letting somebody else take the reins? And the reason I bring that up is I'm not saying we should or shouldn't be, but I am saying the fact that Donald Trump was elected, right, clearly indicates that there is some level of appetite for focusing more on the United States and less on the world stage. Doesn't mean that those people don't want us to be a leader. I think part of the falsehood that may have been shared is that if we focus more on ourselves, then we can go back to being that great, really strong world power. And I think we're still a very strong world power, don't get me wrong. But I mean, I think maybe that's more of it than not that those people don't want us to lead. They believe that the way for us to lead is to be great internally, not necessarily externally. And I think that's a hard thing, right? Because being great externally inevitably means putting our own people in harm's way for other people.
The historical context is, for the majority of Americans right now, well, the United States has always been a world power, right? What do you mean we're not going to be the world power? We've always been the world power. And because if you were born, you'd have to be born before 1940 to understand that the United States was not always a world power. And so most of us, if we don't understand history, well, yeah, the United States is a world power. We've always been a world power since 1776. We've been a world power. I mean, we took down England and we're a world power. And we've always been a world power because we're the United States and we're great. And that's what I think people actually think. And I'm not making fun of them. They just don't know any different. You know what you experience. And their entire 50, 60 years of their life or less has been, even 70 now. Heck, we're in 1921, 70, 80 years. You'd have to be in your 90s to maybe remember when the United States wasn't a world power. So you look around and it's like, well, this has always been the way it is. No, folks, it's not. And if you don't want to be a world power, that's fine. But then many of the things that you take for granted by being an American citizen will no longer exist. People still, whatever you want to believe, jump up straight when the United States walks into the room. We still have that power. Yes. Has our level of respect gone down maybe over the last 4 years, as some people argue? Maybe, but we're still the United States. Why? Because of the things that we've done while we've been a world power. Why are China and Russia trying to take us down? Why are they attacking us if we're still not the big boy in the room? Okay. So we are there. We have what we have because we are there. So unless you're willing to lose some of the respect and authority and the good life that we have, then you want the United States to remain a world power. If you don't, and you're willing to lose some of the respect and some of the things that we have by being a world power, then you can start practicing nationalism and let somebody else run the world for a change. And then all of a sudden, the biggest change that you will see is prices on goods will increase dramatically. You will see huge numbers as far as what we pay for things. That's the easiest thing to explain to people, that the benefit of being the world power. Yes, is it costly? Yes, but it benefits us in the price we pay for goods.
And if you disagree, you can send us an email, podcast@thestateofus.org. Did you just hear? We just encouraged people that disagree to contact us. I hope, and that's not, look how awesome we are, but it really is in this day and age. How many shows out there are doing that? How many people out there are saying, we want to hear from you if you disagree? Because frankly, Lance, I do want to hear from those people because I know they're out there, right? I know there are people out there who are tired of us. And I mean, I would be lying if I didn't say there's a part of me that, having grown up in a world where we are constantly, it feels like, involved in everybody else's business, yeah, there's a part of me that it's like, yeah, that, it'd be nice to not constantly be doing this. And we always have to ask ourselves, what price are we willing to pay? And I don't mean just money, right? Because the biggest cost, I think, has always been and continues to be the thing that weighs on all of us, the American lives that have to be lost in the name of maintaining everything that Lance explained. So far, we've generally felt it's justified. But with the last kind of two major conflicts we've been in, Iraq and Afghanistan, a lot of that's been called into question. And I think we as a nation are grappling with, what is the price we're willing to pay? Especially as war and warfare, right, have become a lot more abstract and gray, more difficult to measure, right? It kind of, World War II was maybe the last conflict where it was really easy to define victory, right?
To talk about World War II is unfair because we have not made any, and I'm not putting down what those people who serve in our armed forces have done for us, because I respect them probably more than I do anybody else, because they are the front line of putting themselves in harm's way for me to live the way I do and to be able to do this show. So I totally respect what they do. But what we've done in Afghanistan and Iraq and those countries, Vietnam, are nothing compared to the sacrifices that was done by the average citizen and the military in World War II. And so when you talk about World War II, I just want to make sure you can compare all of the other military interventions we've done since World War II, add them all together, and maybe you start to come into what was done in World War II. So we can't just throw, and I'm not saying you were, but we can't just throw World War II like, well, we've done this and since World War II. Okay. World War II is because we practiced nationalism and isolationism. We said for 20 years we weren't going to be part of the world because we didn't want to get involved in another big war like the Great War, or what became known as World War I. And what we got was World War II. So ever since, we get involved in smaller conflicts around the world, as you described them, which is true, so that we don't end up in another huge conflagration like World War II. Sorry, I so apologize for interrupting, but I have to make that point, is history shows us what happens if you don't get involved in the minor conflicts, hence Myanmar, because they will grow into something bigger.
You let them fester. You let China, Russia, whoever, right, the Nazis, get a hold. And just to be clear there, I'm not necessarily saying that China and Russia are like the Nazis. That's a different conversation. I'm saying when you allow room for powers like that, doesn't matter who the power is, right? Somebody's going to come in and try to take it. And what we've learned is that usually we're not okay with the way that other people want to run things, right? I mean, not at least since, we became decent friends with the United Kingdom in the back half of the 19th century, not since that point. I mean, we were kind of okay with it, I would say, up until obviously they couldn't keep it together leading up to World War II. I mean, they had a lot of things going on, in fairness. It's not like, there's good reasons that they lost their standing as the world's power, but that was really the last time that we were okay with somebody else kind of running things. And obviously when they were gone and needed our help, it's like, now it's us. And any time that somebody else has wanted to do that, at least since we've existed, we're like, nah, we don't really, the way that you want to do things is not okay, or at least not with us. So we're going to stop you. And that's to Lance's point of, it's not that people haven't sacrificed. It's not that people haven't suffered, right? It's that the total number of people that have suffered is not as large because the conflicts have been smaller. It doesn't mean the people that fought in the conflict or those people's families or our nation hasn't felt effects of those things. It's just less total soldiers, less total death, less total sacrifice by our nation for us to do those things. And that, I think, is the important message of that's part of what makes it difficult is we haven't really had that kind of national reckoning. The closest thing was maybe 9/11, but let's be honest, that didn't require national sacrifice after that, right? In order to do stuff. I mean, maybe a little bit for a short period of time, but I think any historian would say nothing at all like what was required for the scale and scope of something like World War II. And it's good that we haven't had to do that, but it also is complicated to understand. The reason we haven't had to do that is because we've done these smaller things that are more difficult, not as easy to measure, and therefore we are less likely to be supportive of, which then leads us right back to where we were leading up to World War II, where, well, we're going to withdraw, we're going to take it all in. If you want another World War II, then I guess that's what we should do. But if you don't want that, what history seems to tell us is that we must stay involved. And no, it's not fun to talk about, boots on the ground or military intervention in Myanmar. But I think that you have to get serious about, you need to try to reach out to the people that are left from that democratically elected government and say, what do you need us to do? Right? Don't assume that we know, because that may not be what they want. They may want it handled on their own. But my guess is there's more that we can do than what we're doing. And if we would ask them and we would do what needs to be done and we would condemn it on the world stage in a strong way, those things would be a lot more effective than just heaping on the sanctions and staying quiet. At least I think. What do you think, though? Send us an email, right, Lance? How do people do that? They get in touch with us so they can be part of this conversation. They send us an email, podcast@thestateofus.org, because we have this mission and we want to know what they think.
That's right. And our mission here at True Chat is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. And we're so glad that you listened today, and we need you to tell others about us and invoke with them the conversation. And that's the way we're going to change things and make this country and this world a better place to live, which is what the goal is, I think, for all of us. And so if you talk to others and they say, well, how can I listen and become a part of this show and this conversation, then tell them that we're on Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, and everywhere podcasts are found.
The State of Us is a syndicated radio program and a podcast. New episodes of the podcast Tuesdays and Thursdays by 4 a.m. East. So be sure to subscribe everywhere podcasts are found, like Lance mentioned, and the radio show released on the weekends in select talk markets around the nation. So check your local talk market, see if they carry our program. If they don't, call them up and say, hey, you guys got to carry this. For the State of Us on True Chat in Urbana, Ohio, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Special thanks to our producer, Bradley Butch, and thank you, our audience, for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.